Not used to, as you can imagine at my height, I'm not used to looking down at people. And I typically move off a podium when I'm this high so I can get more down on the level where I can see people. But with some of these things up here, I might not do that. But thank you. And George, I hope no one took a photograph along those lines with you and I standing together. Otherwise, people would not think I'm a full-grown human being. But thank you. Joe, that was a tremendously upbeat start. Thank you. I'm just so inspired. Are you a motivational speaker of some kind? Yeah, no, it's very, very good. And the song, I just really cheered me up. I look down, sometimes they put a lavalier on us before we speak, and I didn't want to have one of those Hillary Clinton moments. I would have made her sound like a rock star if I'd been recorded, but thank you so much for that. And Dean, your inspiration with what you're doing, and certainly the public service that you provided. Deshaun, I did the math. You're 17 years old. And while I am 60 years old and in the Senate a teenager, okay, at 60, I can assure you there is no chance you're going to run against me in the United States Senate, okay? But I do wish you well, and I would remind you that there are 2 seats, just for what it's worth. But to Wolfgang, who I know was an inspiration talking about young people, I had an opportunity to sit with Wolfgang at a Kiwanis meeting in Murfreesboro. And he is an outstanding human being. I certainly love what he had to say about young people. And to all of you, I'll just say I certainly was a member of a civic club back at a time when I could be a part of that. I love coming around and talking to Kiwanians, Rotarians, and others. Sorry to mention that. But the fact is, let's face it, you're the folks that make communities like Nashville what they are. You give of yourselves. You help make the community a better place to live. As Joe mentioned, you think globally, but you act locally, and it really is an honor to be with each of you. Thank you so much for your leadership here. What's happening here in Nashville is almost beyond belief. I came in last night through the downtown area and just cannot believe the changes that are taking place. It's a phenomenal place. I know that all of you have played a leadership role in that, and congratulations. And to Doug, before I finish and actually move on to comments, I did serve as Commissioner of Finance here and got to know so many of you here in Nashville back in the middle 90s. I loved living here. It was at a time when my daughters were at that perfect age where they thought I could really coach basketball and soccer and all of those kind of things, and met all the families. But one of those people that I met here was Doug Henry, and I cherished that. He's been an outstanding public servant, and Doug, thank you for that. You're a good man. So what I'd like to do today, if it's all right, I've always found that it's better to talk about what you would like to talk about than myself. I'd like to give some opening comments. And then what I hope will happen is that you will just ask me whatever's on your mind or make whatever comment you might have. I just find that to be a much more rewarding experience, certainly for me, but also think for you. And so I'm going to give you just a little rundown about what's happening in Washington after I make this one statement. I think most of you know that the Senate for me was a little bit frustrating the first term. I've been there now 6 years and 4 months. I'm just 4 months into my next term. I think many of you who know me well know that I had to think about running for a second term. I'd lived a life in business. Most of my service had been at the executive level where you can actually set an agenda and make that happen. And so I had to think about, all of us do, I think, especially as we get older in life, when we look at what we're doing, we have to ask ourselves, is what we're doing worth a grown man's time? Because certainly the last couple of years of my first term was at a time when not much was happening in Washington. It was almost like watching paint dry. I'm now the ranking member on Foreign Relations, and that is a tremendous honor for me. It's almost serendipitous how all of that has happened. But I just want to say to you that as I began to talk about Washington, I feel a difference in my service. I'm thankful to be there. I'm more energized than I've ever been. And when I wake up in the morning to drive to the Capitol down Pennsylvania Avenue, I don't live far away, but I do drive, and I just want to tell you, I look at the dome, I come to work, and every day know what a tremendous privilege it is to serve, to represent the wonderful people of Tennessee, and to weigh in on the major decisions that, while you may be busy raising families, going to work, taking kids to soccer games or grandkids looking at this audience, the fact is that you allow me to get into the details, to look at the policies, and to try to make decisions on your behalf, and that is a tremendous privilege. And I thank you for that. And it's with that I will also say that the environment up there has changed to a degree. I think people have become so frustrated over time with the lack of us solving our nation's problems that there is more public spiritedness and more bipartisanship, candidly, than I've seen in a while. And that's inspiring. I know that you don't see that many times watching from the outside, but I'm on the inside and working with people daily. One of my last calls stepping into here today was with the White House Chief of Staff, or an attempt. We've been trading phone calls this morning, but that was my last call last night. And there is something that's a little bit different that's occurring, and hopefully we will rise to the occasion to move ahead and solve the problems that I know would help cause this outstanding community to be even greater if we could solve some of the bigger problems at the federal level. We're going to be involved in an immigration debate in about a week. It came out of Judiciary Committee before we came home for recess. And for what it's worth, it was an open process where everyone felt that they had the opportunity to weigh in and to create amendments and try to make changes. Obviously, not all of them passed. But for what it's worth, I think it's begun on a footing that is far more positive than the last go-around in 2007. I know that all of us know today that the way the existing situation is just not appropriate. It's untenable for us to remain in the status that we are as it relates to the immigration issue. And it's my hope that somehow or another we'll end up with a piece of legislation that I can support. Obviously, the details matter a great deal. They really do. But my sense is that there's going to be an open process. I know the House is going to look at immigration a little bit differently. But I think we have an opportunity to solve this problem and to put it in the rearview mirror. On a second topic that I still believe to be the most important issue that our nation faces, to me it's still the fiscal issues that are the dilemma. I know that revenues are coming in much stronger, and I'm thankful for that. I'm glad the economy is picking up and that revenues are coming in more strongly than they have in the past. I'm glad that home prices here, and we were talking a little bit about Lydia's business, and I'm glad that home prices here in Nashville are continuing to rise, and they are across the nation. I think that's outstanding. What I feel happening, unfortunately, and today, by the way, for what it's worth, just today, right before I stepped in, the trustees for Medicare said that it looks like that Medicare is going to be solvent a couple of years longer than first anticipated. 2022, it's now going to be 2024, according to the projections. All of those things, to me, are great news, and I think all of us who serve properly in the public arena want good things to happen for our nation. The negative that's occurring, though, is it's reducing the intensity around the issue of dealing with the longer-term fiscal issues. As George mentioned, I've spent a lifetime in business almost prior to being in the public arena, and for that reason, I'm invited often to be in front of public company boards. I mean, they come to Washington. Sometimes I'm out in the field. And I can tell you the thing that still, in spite of the growth and a little bit more optimism than we've had in the past, I still believe it is the issue that could cause our nation to unbelievably take off. Wolfgang, I know his background is from Germany. I was just at a security conference in Munich not long ago, and I can tell you the energy boom that we have in this nation is having a ripple effect around the world. People in Europe, especially in Germany, because the energy policy that, and Wolfgang knows this, the energy policy that Germany now has is not very thoughtful. And the business leaders there know that energy prices are going to continue to rise and actually be less stable because they're going to do away with all nuclear power, believe it or not. And what that's doing is encouraging companies to look at the United States for building plants, not for products for America, but for shipping back to other places. And so we have this unbelievable, unprecedented opportunity in our nation. And I believe that if we could deal with these longer-term fiscal issues and put that in the rearview mirror, it would be beyond belief, really, the effect that it could have on our nation's economy. So I will tell you, the intensity level, I do not feel is there. We have the debt ceiling that will be coming up this year, probably in October, because of where revenues are at this moment. But I just don't feel the intensity. I just hung up right before stepping in with a Wall Street Journal writer discussing this very same thing. It feels like, even as I'm looking at you now, and thank you for paying attention, but I just feel a fiscal fatigue that's almost set in our nation because we've been talking about this issue for so long. But the fundamentals are still there. The average family in America still pays in their lifetime $119,000 into the Medicare program over their lifetime in today's dollars. And the average family today still takes out $357,000 in today's dollars over their lifetime. And so all of you are smart people, and you know that that just won't work. And with 20 million folks in my generation being added to the rolls over the next 10 years, it's a calamity. And if we could just begin tweaking things slightly, it would almost be non-noticeable. We could solve this problem, and people would know that we put it behind us. And again, things would take off. On that note, and not to get in any way rhetorical, because this is just fact, it's not just affecting our nation. It's affecting us around the world. I sat down with President Park, tough, dainty, newly elected president of South Korea. I was there during the time that the North Korea was doing the things that they were doing, what was creating so much turmoil. And obviously it creates fears in that country. We have a tremendous security relationship with them. And the very first thing she talked about and drilled in on, newly elected president, was, is our nation going to have the capacity to deal with the fiscal issues so that we can continue to honor the security agreements that we have? Same thing with Prime Minister Abe in Japan. He was newly elected. He's been making the news with all of his economic efforts. That was not what he wanted to focus on with me. It was Corker. He didn't say it exactly that way. But Corker, you know, we've got issues with China. You know, they're stepping out in the South and East China Seas. Are you guys going to be able to be with us over the long term because of the fiscal issues you have? And in China, the leaders there, candidly, they view us, believe it or not, even though they have their own issues, and they do, they view us in many ways as a nation in decline because we haven't had the courage and the willingness to deal with this issue. So again, even though the intensity has dissipated, I believe it's the biggest issue, and I hope that somehow the ingredients can be in place for us to deal with this issue in a meaningful and appropriate way this fall. I could talk about, I could go into, matter of fact I am, it's 1:33, so I'm going to talk about one other topic, and then I'll stop and take questions. I know there's been a lot of wariness in our country about kinetic activity in other countries, Afghanistan and Iraq, and I truly understand that. And I am blessed and have the good fortune to be able to travel the world and see many of the conflicts firsthand. I know Assad in Syria. I met him actually just prior to all of this breaking out there. I've been to the refugee camps on both the Jordanian border since it broke out and also in Turkey. I've met with Free Syrian rebels. I'm pretty familiar with what's going on in Syria. I have a daily briefing on it every day. When the conflict first broke out, our country's position in Syria was that Assad must go. That was our stated position about a couple of years ago. And candidly, nothing happened after that point. It was more of just a statement. Since that time, and candidly, people had to, ask themselves, does this really rise to the level of being a significant national interest? What's happened since that time in Syria, we have opposition groups who have in there fighting, and it's not unlike the way these opposition groups have sprung up, wouldn't be unlike Green Hills being attacked by a country or an army, and all of a sudden the neighbors there band together and they create an opposition, and then Belle Meade does the same thing, and then West Meade does the same thing, and East Nashville does the same thing. And so my point is, these opposition groups have been sort of scattered and not coordinated, and candidly, especially the moderate groups, the folks that would be more like the folks in this room, if you will, maybe a few differences, but those groups are not the good fighters. They're not good at delivering humanitarian aid. They're not good at, candidly, carrying out an opposition war. And so what's happened is that the extremists, the real extremists in Syria, are also part of an opposition group, and they're the ones that are winning. They're the best fighters. They're the best at delivering humanitarian aid. Believe it or not, they're really good at that, really good at that. They're the best at command and control. And it's only about 6,000 of them. I was just through northern Africa recently, and the hardened, tough fighters from Tunisia, from Libya, from Algeria, they've all gone into Syria and they've taken up the fight. And so now, think about it. You have a country that touches Lebanon, touches Israel, touches Jordan, touches Turkey, touches Iraq. People are spilling out, millions of people into these countries, destabilizing. You've got probably 50 chemical compounds, chemical warfare compounds in the country. And what's happening? Believe it or not, al-Nusra, which is just affiliated with al-Qaeda, is winning. And so now it's the second war that is important to the United States, and that if we end up having a country where Assad leaves and these extremists take over, that is of great national interest. And so I've authored a bill with Senator Menendez, the chairman of the committee, that tries to change the balance and gives us a strategic vision in Syria so that we're focused on the day after Assad leaves, so that we do those things to change the balance in such a way that we lure the Alawites and the Christians who support Assad, because they're worried if these extremists win the conflict, they're going to be exterminated in the country. That's what their fear is. That if we can change the balance where the Alawites believe there's going to be some type of pluralistic government after, and they will actually live as people, we can change the outcome of this conflict and the outcome of the country, and candidly have the opportunity to bring Russia to the table. So I would just say to you, I don't want to see boots on the ground. I think there are ways of us changing the balance without that. I do think we should be arming the vetted rebels, and I say that minus man-pads, which we know after a conflict is over, based on what we saw in Afghanistan, can certainly do tremendous damage to civilian flights coming in country. I think we should change the balance. I think it is of national interest, again, without boots on the ground. And I think it's becoming increasingly important to the people here of Nashville, Tennessee, and our nation that happens, and that happens very soon. So with that, those are three topics. There are multiple other topics that I know are on your mind. I relish tough questions, not in front of the media. I relish whatever's on your mind, but I really appreciate this opportunity.